Well, this is the man of the hour, so we're super excited to have him here today. I know we've had a lot of interest on Facebook and on Pinterest. Consumers have been calling in. It's been huge. And he's a Boilermaker, so I have to throw that in there. Sorry.
Go Purdue.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Hey, guys, thank you for coming. It's so great to see you. So when Jardin Home Brands and Ball approached me about doing Can It Forward Day, I jumped at the chance. I love this event. I love canning. I love cooking with real food. And I especially love tomatoes. And I live in Brooklyn. I grow tomatoes on my roof. And it's really the only thing I grow besides herbs, because it's the one vegetable that just is never good enough unless you grow it yourself or buy it at the farmer's market. And the season is so short. And of course, that's why we're talking about this today, a way to extend that beautiful flavor into the winter. And so I'm going to show you today how to can fresh tomatoes in their own juice using a simple water bath method. I think there are people who are intimidated by the idea of canning and worry that it's hard. And what I'm going to show you today is that it's not hard at all. And after I show you how to make canned tomatoes in their own juice, I'm going to show you a recipe for a classic Italian Sunday gravy, or sugo. If there are Italians in the room, you know what I mean when I say Sunday gravy. That classic long-cooked pasta sauce that's made with these tomatoes. And while spaghetti and meatballs, or spaghetti and pasta sauce might be not be the first thing on your mind on a gorgeous August day at the Green Market, come February, when it's cold, you're going to be glad you did this. And I hope you are doing. I trust you're all regulars here at Union Square. One of the best markets, one of the best green markets in New York City. We are blessed to live in New York, of course. We're also very fortunate to be near so much great farm country in the Hudson Valley, the famous New Jersey tomatoes. And this market also produces a wide variety of interesting, weird stuff like garlic scapes and ramps and great things like that. So it's, again, a real pleasure and a privilege to be here. Any of you doing it? Now, canning, you know, I'm from the Midwest. My relatives are all Southerners. They're all very frugal, and they love to cook with good stuff. So canning is something that I've been doing for a long time and that my family's been doing. But you might not associate canning produce with Manhattan. I don't know, does anybody here do home canning, or you just have you do? And maybe you've come in from the suburbs as well. I do it, a lot of people with big gardens do it because you kind of have to. You've got tons and tons of produce and it's going to go to waste if you don't can it. There are other great reasons why canning has become such a hot trend, notably among younger people. Of course, Brooklyn is famous these days for its artisanal everything, from mayonnaise to craft beer. I mean, there's a shop in Prospect Heights that sells nothing but artisanal mayonnaise. You can't get more Brooklyn than that. It sounds like something from an episode of Portlandia. In fact, they've probably played off that already. But there are other reasons that home canning has really taken off, aside from merely preserving your garden's bounty. One of those reasons is that it makes a terrific host gift to bring something homemade, like jam or jelly, or even just, fresh sweet tomatoes or spaghetti sauce. I'm going to show you later an idea that a friend of mine showed me as a host gift coming to my house. He made a cocktail and put it in a ball mason jar, put a pretty label on it, and I felt like Martha Stewart had just dropped by. It was great because it was a pre-made cocktail with sort of like fig-infused vodka and something else, and something fancy, and I was able to just pour that into a cocktail shaker, shake it up, strain. It was so easy and such a great way to kick off an evening. Right now, we're going to do something a little more wholesome, and that is show you how to can tomatoes. You don't even need to sterilize your jars for this. The jars, you need to wash them with soap and water, and you want to keep them warm. We usually use often use a crock pot for that purpose. For our purposes today, I'm just going to do it straight up and simple. So to can tomatoes, the first thing you want to do is get the skins off of them. Get a pot of boiling water. I'll just show you one. Look at these gorgeous tomatoes. I don't even know what kind these are. From the Green Market, beautiful variety of tomatoes. First, you take a knife and you score the end like this, and it just makes it easier for the skin to peel off. Blanch that for about 60 seconds in boiling water. By the way, as we go, If we have questions, I forgot your name, I'm sorry. Meredith. As we go, Meredith has a microphone. I love to keep these things really loose. So if anybody has questions about canning, about cooking, about, not politics, about Chopped or anything else, please feel free to pipe up and wave at Meredith and she'll come over. So after 30 seconds, 40 seconds, some of the tougher ones might take the full minute. The skin starts to peel back on the tomato. It's just kind of unpleasant in the jar to have the skin, so you want to get that off. And you take your tomato out of the boiling water, shock it immediately in an ice bath. Makes it easier to handle and also helps to get the skin. Do we have an overhead camera here? Oh, you're shooting down with that, okay. So as you can see, the skin starts to crack and it just slides right off of the tomato. And there we go. Anybody have questions about anything? I noticed someone who looked surprised when I said you don't have to sterilize the for this procedure, and that saves a lot of trouble. One of the most important things I guess I should talk about with canning is that you really need to go by a USDA-approved recipe. The goal is to preserve things safely and to keep them tasting wonderful, and to do that properly, you need to have a high enough pH in the food that you're canning. So when you can tomatoes, you actually have to add a little bit of lemon juice to reduce the pH to the proper level, make them as acidic as they need to be to store them safely. And when you can tomatoes, you can can them for up to a year, which is true of most products. Now you can try to put these in whole, but to can them in their own juice, I like to cut them a little bit, and that just helps the juices to release better. But before I do that, in the jar goes 2 tablespoons of bottled lemon juice. Now, for most purposes, I use fresh squeezed lemon juice. For this recipe, we recommend that you use bottled lemon juice because the pH is consistent, and it's not going to affect your flavor. So 2 tablespoons in a quart jar, 2 tablespoons of bottled lemon juice. I like to use a teaspoon of kosher salt. If you're on a low salt diet, you could reduce that a little bit. That's not really critical to the preservation. It's just for flavor. And you start cutting these guys up and tossing them in, which will take me a second. So if anybody has any questions, you might want to wave over at Meredith. That's Meredith with the microphone, being our Phil Donahue today. Well, I'm just cutting tomatoes, and I'll repeat the question for the online folks. By the way, hi online folks, thank you for watching. Send us your questions and maybe we'll have a chance to field them. Yes, what's on your mind?
Yes, I've found that canning Romas is the easiest for me just because there are less seeds. And so ultimately I usually make like a tomato sauce with it, but do you have a favorite type that you tend to stick to?
What type did you say, Romas?
Romas.
I don't, I like to can Romas, but I like to can any kind of tomato. I wonder if the need for the lemon juice, and when Jessica comes back, I'll ask her, different types of tomatoes have different levels of acidity. So the variety that you can, I think that could also become an issue. There are, I believe, yellow tomatoes. I think the Sun Gold tomato is bred for the purpose of being lower in acid. There are a lot of people who have trouble eating tomatoes because of their tummy, and so they often can get away with eating the yellow ones. Right now I'm growing 6 types of tomatoes on my roof. Green zebras, black prince, Mr. Stripey, some kind of scary hybrid beefsteak thing that I grow for safekeeping. Just the hybrids are a little finicky. And in fact, Mr. Stripey is the loser of the season for me. The plant is the size of a human being, and it has 3 fruits on it, and they all have blossom indrot. Even though I put lime in the soil, I'm super irritated about this. But my green zebras and my black princes are doing great, and my Romas are also doing great. Yes, did you have a question also?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you if you're still answering a question.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you if you're still answering a question.
No, that's okay. I mean, my answer basically is I like canning all kinds of tomatoes, and it's funny how anytime you put something into a ball jar, it looks gorgeous. I don't know why that is, but so it's especially fun to have yellow tomatoes, green tomatoes, red tomatoes, and they look beautiful.
Great.
in addition to tasting great. I keep interrupting you.
No,
Sorry.
it's okay. I have that bad habit too, so don't feel bad. I guess I was just wondering, what is your advice on how to pick out a good tomato? Mostly at my store, I have just the common red vine, and sometimes they're hard, sometimes they're too soft. So what would you suggest as a good rule of thumb for picking out a good one?
Well, first of all, I think that's the good question. The question is, how do you select nice tomatoes? First of all, I don't even think about using tomatoes when it's, say, February, because they're just not very good. The hothouse tomatoes are a little better than the ordinary tomatoes, but they're still not the same. I mean, you want to look for fruit that doesn't have any bruises on it, that doesn't have any bad spots on it, that's not cracked, particularly for canning. You don't want a tomato that has cracked skin. You know, insects could get in there. You want them to be soft, but not too soft. So a little bit of squeezing is okay. I also like to, when I'm buying produce, I like to smell it. And a tomato should smell sweet and smell like a tomato. It's as I mentioned before, it's hard to find at a supermarket tomatoes that are really raring to go because they ship them green and let them ripen on the truck, and they don't really ripen properly when they're not on the vine in the heat, in the sun. So you're fortunate to have Union Square Green Market. I also love to shop in my borough of Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Kitchen in Williamsburg, or in my neighborhood in Fort Greene, Clinton Hill. Green Grape Provisions is a place that sells beautiful heirlooms. They cost a little bit, but you know, all these farmers that work in the Hudson Valley and load up those trucks and drive down here and grow organically, it's expensive and difficult to grow good food. So if you're lucky enough to be able to afford it, I feel good about supporting these farmers. Of course, the best tomato you're ever going to have is the one you grow yourself. Do you do that?
We try a lot with cherry tomatoes because where my family lives, we have deer, so we can't really plant. But I mean, maybe out of 10 that come out, maybe 2 to 3 are edible. Unfortunately, but
it's a battle, isn't it?
It is.
You know, my partner and I also are beekeepers, and we have 3 beehives on the roof as well. And this has not been a good year for bees. No, I'm not talking about colony collapse. That's a whole other issue. But the weather this year was tough for beekeeping. We had a ton of rain in the spring, and bees have trouble flying when raindrops are hitting them, so they stay home. Then we had a super hot summer, which is not very good for flowers. The weather now is perfect, so we're hoping to get another nectar flow, another good batch of flowers for our bees to feed on. But the short stroke of where I'm getting at is farming is hard. Farming is really hard. It's no easier in New York City than it is in Iowa. So as you go, a couple things you got to keep in mind. And by the way, do we have, Jessica? Do we have one of Ball's the headspace measuring kit thing with the bubble remover? Okay, well I'll do this. A couple points that I need to make about canning tomatoes in their own juices, which is that you really want to get the tomatoes just jam-packed in here, leaving the appropriate amount of space at the top. We call that head space. For this recipe, we want ½ an inch of head space. You also notice here, I don't know if this is going to show online, but I got a little air bubble here, and that's bad. We don't want that. So you want to stick a tool like a plastic spatula, a wooden spoon might work. Ball actually makes a specific tool that helps you measure the head space and that you can use to sort of press inside the jar, and from one side, press the food gently toward the opposite side. You go around your jar and do that, trying to squeeze out your air bubbles.
Right. And so one of the items in the giveaway is actually our home discovery kit, and it comes with a paper version of the headspace tool. So you're more than
Right, okay. Yeah. So for those of us that don't know what ½ an inch is, Ball is kind enough to demonstrate that here in the kit that's in the giveaway.
giveaway, yeah, the home discovery kit.
The home discovery kit is being given away.
Yes, it is.
And by the way, isn't there also a discount for people online who are watching?
Yes, so
if they want to buy canning stuff?
Absolutely. So the code is It's the Easy to Can 13, and that'll give them free shipping and 10% off of any purchase that's over $25. So
Not
that
bad.
home discovery kit, if you're new to canning, as I've mentioned before, there are recipes for canning tomatoes in that. So this is a perfect segue into your demonstration.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Okay, so coincidentally, these tomatoes were the exact amount that we wanted to produce a 1/2 inch headspace. And it looks like, headspace sounds like I'm talking about going to a Grateful Dead concert or something. So you can see that we're good on air bubbles in that we don't have any. And then what you want to do, and note, so the headspace is important because we're going to boil this for an hour and a half, and there needs to be room for the food to expand as it processes. So you want to wipe off the edge of the jar here, the lip of the jar. Now, I had an interesting question answered for me by Jessica, who is going to help me with any technical matters that come up. I said, hey, Jessica, why could I not just stick a bay leaf in here for flavor? And she said, even a bay leaf could alter your pH. It could throw off, so that it could introduce a safety problem.
Right.
But what did you say I could do instead of a fresh bay leaf?
So anything that's dried. So if you have any dry ingredients, you can always add those to your foods to add some extra flavor, make it a little more personalized and have a little fun with it. If you do add something like Ted was saying with it, you don't want to chance the pH. Canning is very easy when you follow tested recipes, so it's very important. And tomatoes are kind of iffy on the pH scale. They can be low, they can be high. Some of you may actually pressure can your tomatoes, then you don't need the additional acid of lemon juice or vinegar. But it's a different process. So we're doing water bath because it's easy and we're outside.
Yeah.
And then that's why you would have your vinegar or lemon juice. So you don't want to mess with the pH. It's easy and fun, but you can still have a lot of room to be creative with your dry ingredients.
Now, we had one question about what variety of tomato one might choose to can, and it occurred to me that some yellow tomatoes are lower in acid than red tomatoes. Would you suggest an extra spoonful of lemon juice in that case? Or do you need to go to a recipe for yellow tomatoes?
I would suggest doing a recipe, but something like that, you're probably just better off going to the pressure canning method at that point, just to ensure. Because what you're doing during canning is killing any microorganisms and bacteria that may be present, which is what makes it shelf stable for a year. So always safe, better safe than sorry. But you can always contact your local extension office. And sometimes too, if it's like a regional fruit or vegetable, they may know more about it than maybe we do at Jarden Home Brands. Or maybe the USA too. So it's always a good resource to check your extension agents as well.
But for now, let's just stick to red tomatoes. So here's our lid. These lids, you only use these lids once for processing canned food. You can use them later to store stuff if you want, but these lids should be used only once. You want to inspect the lid, make sure it looks good, make sure there aren't any crimps or anything in it. The jars can be used over and over again, but you want to take a look at the lip and make sure there aren't any chips in it or anything. By the way, I wanted to mention, when you pack the food into the jar, you want to use a non-metal implement. You want to use wood or plastic because microscopic scratches on the inside of the jar could eventually weaken the jar and allow it to crack. They're pretty tough, though, in general. Take your lid, put it on, take your ring, and you want to tighten this only finger tight. You don't want to torque that down too much. The reason for that is that as this cooks in our cooker, it's actually going to release gases. As the food boils, it's going to release gases. And of course, the button on top right now moves when you press it. By the time we finish, if we get a good seal, of course, that button will be like this, and you won't be able to make that little sound anymore. Okay, so over here we have some water that is boiling nicely. This is a canner that will hold up to 7 jars. And I'm just going to do one for demo purposes. Get my handles out of here. And this is a really nicely designed rack for the canner because it has 2 positions. You can position it like that to get it ready to put your jars in. I'll put this one right in the middle, okay? Lower it down. And technically, I would like to see, I want 1 or 2 inches of water above the top of the jar to correctly process it. Obviously, we're not going to sit here for an hour and a half and really do this one, so you can give me a little poetic license, and I'll show you the finished product. I probably need to pick up the pace a little bit. I'm shooting the bull too much. Do we have a little bit of leave? Are we tight? Are we good?
This is your hour. You do what you want to do. We're
It's
here.
my hour, but
like
my hour's rapidly diminishing.
I said, it's your world. We're just living in it. We can adjust. Don't worry about it.
No, it's Frank Sinatra's world. We're just living in it.
Absolutely.
Okay. So now I would like to show you an excellent use for those tomatoes, and that is Sunday gravy. Do we have any Italian Americans here, or even Italian Italians? I see one way in the back. Hi there. One time I was demoing this recipe. I'm just going to make a mess because I can. One time I was demonstrating this recipe, and I said, this is an Italian classic, and somebody raised their hand and said, actually, it's a northern Italian classic. Okay, look, I'm from Ohio. I do the best I can. Anyway, when you see, you know what, I think we blew out here. Do you know how to light this thing?
I'll take a look. I don't know.
You don't know?
I'll take a look.
Well, you know what? Maybe here, I'll just switch to this one.
Okay.
Because I don't need this boiling water anymore. All right. Okay, so as with so many things that are delicious, this sauce begins with sofrito, also known as mirepoix, also known as, by some, including Jeffrey Zakarian, as the holy trinity of onions, celery, and carrots in a nice dice. This is a great thing to make a big batch of and freeze in little pint containers, and it'll shave 20 minutes, 30 minutes off your cooking time the next time you go to make this. Of course, I'm talking to people in Manhattan where refrigerators are this big and stoves are this big. If you're lucky enough to have a nice kitchen in this town, you are lucky indeed. So a couple of cups of onions, couple of cups of carrots, couple of cups of celery, and by the way, as we go, again, questions are fine. I'm going to share tips as we go, as they occur to me. And one that I'd like to share with you now is, a lot of recipes tell you to put garlic in at the same time as you put in your diced onions. No. And I thank you for agreeing with me. I hate that, and I find it very common. Garlic only needs about 1 minute. And good recipes will say, you know, you're going to sweat your onions and your carrots for about 8 minutes. Throw the garlic in and cook till fragrant. What that means is until you smell it, which is that'll happen in about a minute. So I'm going to get my sofrito going. I hear a nice healthy sizzle. Can you guys hear the sizzle online? This is really dangerous. And I like to also maybe season a little bit at this stage. I think it helps to draw some of the juices out of our aromatic vegetables. I love that smell. Every time I do this, I think to myself, I wonder how many times I've chopped this onion and this carrot and this celery, like 100, 200, 4,000, 80,000, and it always smells great to me. Anything on anybody's minds? Do we have a question?
Hi. I have a gardening question.
Sure.
I also grow tomatoes, and this year I actually start them from seed, which is also very, very easy to do.
Yes.
And but anyway, I planted 2 types. I actually last year was in the Finger Lakes, and I found this fabulous red tomato that I loved. So when I brought it back to Manhattan, I actually took the seeds out, dried them, and started plants this year. And then I also go to Arthur Avenue and buy San Marzano seeds for my other tomatoes. So anyway, so I planted them, they're growing, and all the plants, I planted about 11 plants, and they all came up except for one, which completely flowered, but no fruit.
Oh.
So my question to you is, do you know why that happened? Flowers, but no fruit.
Flowers, but no fruit.
Now, I was thinking maybe the bees did not pollinate the plant, or is there another reason?
You know what? That's a great question, and that's a very frustrating gardening problem. I've had that myself. I'm not an expert in horticulture, but I'm pretty sure that tomatoes do not need bees to pollinate. In fact, there was just an article on in Time Magazine cover story about the bee colony collapse problem, and they had a graph that showed which vegetables are the most dependent upon bees. Among them, almonds are 100% dependent on bees. Without bees, almonds are done. So the bee problem is a really scary one. Tomatoes were nowhere on the list at all. I believe that tomatoes might even self-pollinate, but I'm not, if anybody knows do we have a horticulturalist in the house?
No.
So, do you have an answer? Can you holler, I'm sorry, could you please holler out the answer on the microphone so everybody?
I do it by hand. You know, just do it with a paintbrush, a little tiny paintbrush.
You pollinate by hand. So you go from one flower to another flower with a paintbrush, a little artist brush.
And to get back to your problem with the bees, this year I noticed that my spider flowers, especially the white ones, they're covered with bees all the time.
Spider flowers?
I think the name is Cleome, C-L-E-O-M-E.
Okay.
So, but the white ones in particular, the purple ones, not so much, or the lilac.
Yeah,
so.
Bees know what they like. My bees, I've never seen them on any of my tomato flowers, but they come to the soil to drink water. There is one other thing you could try. I'm not sure how organic it is, and I grow very strictly organic, but in Chicago, when I had that problem with blossoms that didn't become fruit, there's a product you can buy called Blossom Set Spray, and I think it's a hormone, which sounds a little creepy to me, but it might be totally natural, I don't know. You just spray it on the flower and it makes the flower last longer, giving it more opportunity to be pollinated. But, you know, going around with a paintbrush and doing the pollinating, hey, whatever works. Okay. I'm sorry? Don't you love the internet? I have an audience member who has just confirmed that tomatoes do self-pollinate. Thank you, sir. There's no such thing as unanswered trivia anymore. I'm sorry, let's get the microphone to you real quick.
So is that one plant a eunuch?
Is that one plant a eunuch? That sounds like that's a really personal question for the plant. I guess so. I mean, farming is hard. I will say that, you know, that Mr. Stripey plant that I have, which is such a loser, as you know, tomatoes prefer to be in the ground as opposed to containers. And I use earth boxes, which are great, but clearly the Mr. Stripey is just not a good candidate for my rooftop. Conditions are kind of harsh up there. Okay, I'm just going to proceed a little more on the sauce here. So let's say our mirepoix is pretty cooked. And let's say I'm going to put in the garlic now. That's a lot of garlic. Emerald would say bam, right about now. Stir that up. I love Emerald. I've got some fabulous, I actually make pasta from one of his recipes all the time. So throw the garlic in. It's going to start to get fragrant. And then create a little space for yourself on the bottom of the pot. We're going to take some tomato paste and just kind of toast it a little on the bottom. We're going to open the tomato paste first, and then we're going to put it in there and toast it a little on the bottom. This is a trick I got from Lydia Bastianich, not personally, just from one of her books. I love her too. And toast that a little on the bottom, stir everything together, and then here's the thing about this type of pasta sauce. I grew up thinking that when an Italian granny was stirring her sauce for hours and hours in the kitchen, or grandpa, it's often a man, it could be, as you know, the Italian kitchen is quite egalitarian. I used to think of this as a tomato sauce, but really, tomatoes are just a supporting act in this sauce. I'm right now putting 12 cups of chicken stock in here. By the way, and I'm going to reduce that chicken stock from 12 cups to 6, which is really going to intensify the flavor. So for me, this sauce is really more about sofrito and reduction of stock than it is a simple tomato sauce. And this is one of the differences between Sunday gravy that you make or a pasta sauce that you buy in a jar, most of which have tons of added sugar. I mean tons, a ridiculous amount. One brand, I won't name any names, a serving of it has something like 1/3 of a cup of added sugar. And I think when you do a focus group, the audience tasting, they probably take one bite and they think, this tastes good. And so that brand becomes popular. You know, when they do testing for soda pop, people always prefer sweeter to less sweet. But tomatoes should be sweet on their own. Another great reason to can. Another little tidbit I might share with you is that this, you know, I'm not working for these guys, but this is a very good brand of stock. When you're shopping for chicken stock or vegetable stock or beef stock, I learned this from Cook's Illustrated magazine, which is a great magazine. Go down the nutrition facts and look at how many grams of protein are in the chicken stock. This brand has 5 grams. Many on the market have 3 grams or 2.5 grams. What that means is that they're not using as much meat or as much bones when they make the stock, which means it's a lower quality stock. And it will still make your food taste better, but really more so because it's salty water, not so much because it's a good stock. These guys actually even make these guys make a variety of stock that doesn't have any salt in it at all. And when you're doing something like reducing a stock from 12 cups to 6, it can get too salty. I always use low sodium stock, and I often use no sodium stock. In a dish like this, it's a really great idea. So in real life, we bring this puppy to a boil, let it reduce from 12 cups to 6. I think that's probably about half an hour. And let's go ahead and add our tomatoes as well and get them cooking down. Everything looks happy over here, maybe a little too happy. So it's February and it's cold out and you're looking out the window of your Union Square penthouse apartment, wishing that the green market were only here, but you have these. And that is special and good eating. I think also in here we're going to put a couple of bay leaves. And maybe maybe a little thyme would be good. Definitely going to need some more salt, but I've already put in a teaspoon of salt, so I'm going to just let that cook down, and I'll taste it for seasoning at the end of the line. Actually, you know, the basil, I don't want to put the basil in until the end. Basil is a really delicate herb. By the way, do you guys know the technique of taking basil leaves and rolling them? Roll them up into, first you take the stems off, roll the leaves up into sort of like a little cigar, and then take your knife and have kind of a back and forth motion so that you're slicing rather than chopping, because chopping can be bad. Oh gosh, I made you nervous. Sorry. No fingers were removed in this cooking demonstration yet. I get a lot of that at my office. But I have to go back to work on we're going back into production on Chopped on Tuesday. Thank you. I'm not trying to milk you for applause, but thank you Food Network, and thank you Chopped viewers. Super excited. We've had a nice long break. All our regulars are back. Jeffrey Zakarian, Marcus Samuelson, Amanda Freitag, Alex Gornishelli, Aaron Sanchez, the only name that I pronounce with a R in it. I don't even know why I do that, but what am I going to do? Call him Aaron? Hey, Aaron Sanchez. Coming back for another run of 39 episodes. And, but right now, there are no gummy bears on this stage, and I'm not in too much, I'm a slow food person, ironically, considering where I work. I would rather roast a pork shoulder for 8 hours over charcoal than cook a fast stir fry. Do you have a question, Meredith? Or are you going to cut me off?
No, never. We have a couple questions from social media, and one of them actually was about Chopped, so I thought I'd jump in now. How often on Chopped do the judges run across an absolutely awful underlined dish?
I remember one time, Mark Murphy, one of our judges, he can be tough, but he's generally a really affable guy, really nice guy. I remember one time he got a dish and he just said, he took a couple bites and pushed it around the plate and he said, "I hate this. I hate it." It's very difficult. And by the way, is there a camera I should be looking into as I address social media? Yours? Thank you, sir. And thank you for the question. First of all, we have to keep in mind that Chopped is unbelievably difficult. It's really hard in 20 minutes when somebody gives you an 8-pound leg of lamb and gummy bears and, you know, maybe another protein, clams or something, and you're supposed to make an appetizer out of that. So, in fairness. So because of that, and because sometimes we give them great ingredients. I love the episode that just aired on Tuesday. Last Tuesday, it was the wasted episode, where we took ingredients that many people would throw away, like the carcass of a fish, or coffee grounds, or orange rinds, and the chefs had to cook with those, and we had a really good cast of chefs on that show. And their reaction to that special theme was they loved it. They loved it. They loved being able to demonstrate. Every chef thinks that way. You don't throw a beautiful cod carcass. You don't throw away fish heads. First of all, there's meat in the collar around the gills of a big fish. But secondly, you can make beautiful soup with that, beautiful stock. And I just loved that themed episode, showing people, encouraging people to cook that way. I'm sorry, I got off on a tangent. Yes, sometimes the judges say, this is awful, especially if it's made with a difficult ingredient like, chicken feet or durian fruit or, Rocky Mountain oysters. I mean, how delicious could they possibly be? And so a common question people ask is, why don't I get to taste the food? And am I unhappy that I don't get to taste the food? Sometimes I'm unhappy. Sometimes I'm okay with it. Time, let's put some time in here. And did you have another question, Meredith, from the interwebs?
I do. I have a couple more, actually.
Okay.
Sylvia from Colorado asked how you feel about freezing tomatoes.
Sylvia from Colorado, the beautiful state of Colorado. I was just in Aspen in June for the Food and Wine Classic, and I had a ball. How do I feel about freezing tomatoes? I do it all the time, but you can only do it. You got to grind them up, or I only do it by grinding them up. I do that, let's say, if I don't have enough time to can. But that also gets me into a freezer space war with my partner, Barry. I want to fill my freezer with stocks and soups and chili. Barry wants there to be enough room for ice cream bars. So if I'm in a rush and I have a bunch of tomatoes and I'm about to go out of town for 10 days, I'll take them and throw them in my food processor, buzz them up, and I like to store them in plastic pint containers that I get from my restaurant supply store. And I love those containers because they're cheap, they stack. A pint is a really good size for one serving of soup or maybe 2 servings of spaghetti sauce. And air can move around them in your freezer. I used to store everything in zipper bags, but once you freeze a liquid in a zipper bag, it turns into this slippery frozen missile with a sharp edge that comes flying out of the fridge and lands on your foot, and the Sharpie, the markings, the labeling gets rubbed off sooner or later. So I love the, oh boy, I still have some time. Because I still want to make a cocktail too. So anyway, and we'll get back to questions in a sec. So let's pretend that I have simmered my sauce down for ages. And what you end up with, and I wanted to present this over some spaghetti noodles. I don't know whether we found any spaghetti noodles or not. So there are.
Yay!
Okay. Now, let me share another pasta lesson from Scott Conant. Scott Conant is a wonderful chef. He has several restaurants all over the country and even some in Canada. Notably in New York, his restaurant Scarpetta, which is in the meatpacking district on 14th Street. Scott Conant is very famous for a very simple pasta dish that's nothing but spaghetti and red sauce. I think there are 9 ingredients in the whole dish. It's not even cheap, but it's really good. And it's just one of the most beautiful one of the most beautiful examples of pasta cooking that you're ever going to find. One of the things that drives Scott crazy is when people abuse pasta. And so maybe I'll just give you, since we have a minute, I'll give you a quick pasta tutorial, and then I'll show you what I like to do with noodles like this. So every recipe for pasta tells you to cook your pasta in heavily salted water, but they don't tell you how much salt to use. And maybe that's because they don't know how big your pot is or how many servings you're going to make or whatever. But Alex Gornishelli and Scott Conant both gave me a really excellent way to tell how salty. First of all, fill your pot with water. You want a lot of water. Put some salt in it, and then stir it really well and taste it. Your pasta water should taste as salty as chicken soup. That surprises a lot of people. It takes a lot of salt to make a pot this big full of water taste as salty as chicken soup. It might take half a cup of salt. That sounds like an obscene amount of salt. But think about the reason you're doing it. It's just like, let's say I love potato chips, and I hate low salt potato chips. Imagine a potato chip with 0 salt on it. That's kind of what you're doing if you cook pasta without salt in the water. You need to season the noodles. If you have a concern about that large amount of salt, realize also that once you take the noodles out of there, you're flushing 99% of that salt down the drain. It was only there to get the flavor into the noodle. Rule number 2, dump your pasta out when it's not ready yet. You want to take the pasta out of the water before it's al dente. When it still has a little bit of, and it's not cooked yet, it's not finished. Don't rinse it. Never rinse pasta. I've seen it done on cooking shows by really talented people who must just disagree with me. Don't rinse pasta. The reason you don't rinse pasta is because when it comes out of that, and in fact, it's always also a good idea to reserve some of your cooking water because it has starch in it, and that you can use that to thin up your sauce a little bit if you want to. These noodles have starch on them, and that's good because they help the sauce to stick to the noodle. That's what you want. If you rinse your pasta, or worse yet, if you put olive oil in your pasta water, don't do that. The sauce will slip off of the noodles, and that's not what you want. Rule number 3, to finish those noodles, these noodles are not ready yet. I have a pot of my beautiful sauce, my sugo. You can see it's thickened up nicely. And I'm not sure if the proportions are correct here. I'm not sure. I actually probably need a little more noodles than this, but just for purposes of demonstration, finish cooking the noodles in the sauce. Now this means that you have to have the right amount of sauce going in. So maybe I should have taken some of that sauce out and added my noodles and then stirred and then checked. But this is nice because what it's doing, you're finishing the noodles in the sauce, you're integrating, the noodles are going to absorb the flavor of the sauce. And the starch being on the noodle is going to permit the sauce to cling to the noodles. You know, a lot of people will present their spaghetti with the nice white spaghetti and then they'll pour a little dollop of sauce in the middle, and that's fine. But really, what I like and what Scott has taught me is you want this. This is what you want. Look at that. Every noodle is just covered in sauce. And then Scott will give you a serving about this big and charge you 38 bucks. No, I think it's 24. It's not 38. Worth every penny. And I should have saved a whole, I kind of did, an intact basil leaf. And that's just, to me, a thing of real beauty. Thank you very much. That's kind of you. All made with courtesy of our beautiful Ball canning jars. By the way, now I don't work, except for today, I don't normally work for Jarden Home Products or for Ball jars, but I'm going to share with you an interesting fact about their business. The sales of Ball canning jars have grown 30% a year lately. 30%, which is unbelievably big. And I think what that reflects is obviously a growth of interest particularly among younger people. You know, those hipsters that you see on Portlandia and Brooklandia, you go to the Brooklyn Kitchen, everybody in there is 25 with an insanely ridiculous mustache and an Amish beard and tattoos everywhere and a longboard. Do you think it's okay for a 45-year-old to skateboard? I do. I think it's fine. I feel you look a lot cooler than you would look on a Segway. But anyway, aside from the interest in canning and preserving fresh food, of course, how many barbecue restaurants have you been to where your iced tea, where your sweet tea comes to the table in a mason jar? And of course, it's always the iconic Ball mason jar. Well, cocktails, and you can actually buy a shaker top that will convert a mason jar into a cocktail shaker, which is cute. Let's go ahead and put that in there. There we go. So I'd like to show you real quick. Oh, look at that. We have these all dolled up. Aside from bringing, and I got a couple minutes, I'm good?
No, you're fine.
I'm good?
Oh,
Okay.
we can adjust. You have fun. Everyone's enjoying it. Go for it.
Well, they haven't left yet. So I think an idea that also I think works really well with this product is a great host gift. There's nothing wrong with taking a bottle of wine when someone has you over for dinner. In fact, there are plenty of things right about that. But I think it shows a little greater measure of warmth and specialness if you bring a homemade food, if you bring a jam or a jelly. One thing I really love to make is real maraschino cherries. And I hate to be telling you that now because sour cherry season is over. And you need sour cherries to make real maraschino cherries. You sometimes can find them frozen. All you have to do to make real maraschino cherries is to put them in a pot, pour maraschino liqueur over them. This is a liqueur that's really wonderful, not nearly as sweet as those fake maraschino cherries that we've all grown up with. And real maraschino cherries are absolutely delicious. It couldn't be easier to make. You just simmer the cherries for a second. I think maybe you just steep them in the liqueur, put that in jars, stick it in the fridge. You take a little jar of maraschino cherries over to somebody who really likes drinking Manhattans, and they will like you a lot. You can even use a little of the, of course, the cherries infuse the liqueur. You could put a splash of that liqueur into the drink, and it's really special. Now, the other day I had a couple of friends come over. Hello, are you a conductor? Are you an aspiring symphony conductor? There's a beautiful child who's waving arms around. Anyway, I digress. I had a couple friends come over for a dinner party not long ago, and they brought me a host gift that I thought was just great. And I mentioned it earlier. They had infused vodka with figs. They had made something else. I don't remember what it is now. And they had some kind of beautiful organic juice of something. And they mixed this up at home with really high quality spirits and then funneled it into a mason jar and put a beautiful label on it that Martha herself would be proud of that's had the name of the drink on it. So today I'm going to show you a cocktail that I just dug up online but that I thought sounded nice, and it allowed me to mention this maraschino liqueur idea. Hemingway cocktail. Where's my shaker? Where's my ice? And while I'm trying to get ice into this shaker, if anyone else has a question, we have a few minutes left. I got to load this up. Got a question?
We have a couple of social media when he's done too.
Okay. Hi, how are you?
Hi. So I know you just mentioned the proper way to cook pasta. How have you heard about the way, the new method of starting it up with cold water that I've heard floated around that Alton Brown also now advocates? You're flinching.
I'm wincing, yes. The cold water technique for cooking pasta. Maybe you could hang on to the mic for a second, because I'm skeptical. There's nothing wrong with the real way of cooking pasta. But if Alton's embraced it, there must be something to it. Do you know, how do you do it?
You start up, you have just enough water just to cover the pasta.
Okay.
Cold pot, everything goes in. You turn on the water. The pasta heats up with the water, and then you leave it at a simmer. Cover the lid. Turn off the heat. It's fine because the science of it is that the pasta only needs to be at the heat of just below boiling in order to cook.
Right.
You need to stir the pasta for the first 2 minutes that it's cooking, it's going, but then you put the lid on and step away.
What about the risk of it sticking to itself?
That's why you stir for 2 minutes at the beginning.
So once you've got that initial outside of the noodle cooked, it's not going to stick. That's interesting, and I mean, I'm open-minded about new techniques, and it almost sounds like sous videing pasta.
It's less energy, and you don't have to wait for a whole pot of water to boil.
I certainly appreciate the idea of using less energy in the process. I have a feeling, I don't know if you've ever seen Chopped or any of Scott Conant's shows, but Scott would probably say, you know what I would do before I did that? I would flip this table over before I did that. I will ask Scott about that. I'll be seeing him, and I'm sure he will say, I'll have to look that up. So cold water pasta cooking technique, interesting. I mean, I think you'd have to adjust your timing for every different type of noodle. That's one little problem. I don't think you're going to see a lot of restaurants doing it because they need to keep the water going. They don't even turn off their burners in restaurants. They're cranked all the time. But thank you for asking. That's very interesting. And I might also point out that other types, there are some sort of preparations that you might make, say, with a soba noodle or something, where you do need to rinse it. But I'm talking about the approach to Italian pasta. No rinsey. Did you have another question? Or
Dial
should-
M for Moms did. They asked if there's one kitchen tool you cannot live without.
Kitchen tool that I can't live without. Well, I'm living without it right now because this knife is too little. I like an 8-inch chef's knife. There's an American knife manufacturer called Lamson Sharp in Massachusetts, the oldest knife company in the country. They do not pay me to mention their brand, but I love them. They're affordable. A chef's knife is about, I think it's about 80 bucks. So they're more affordable than some of the fancy German brands. And they also make some really beautiful handles. The handles that I have are, they're red plastic swirly stuff. It looks like a bowling ball. The line is called Fire. Another thing that drives me, a tool that's very important to me is cutting boards that are made of wood or plastic. This one's made from bamboo, so it's nice and sustainable. When I was shooting Queer Eye with my buddies, you would not believe how many homes we went into where people were cutting on one of those nubbly glass boards, glass or marble, cutting. Those boards are for maybe presenting cheese or something, but you can't. You're going to ruin your knife immediately. You need something soft like wood. Thank you for wincing, because that's the appropriate response. Another tool that requires you to renovate your kitchen if you don't have one of these yet, but that I really love, is a very strong range hood. And if you're going to renovate your kitchen, this is very hard to do in Manhattan because you often get a range hood that truly vents to the outside. And if you're in a house as opposed to an apartment building, put the motor for my range hood is outside on the roof as opposed to in the kitchen. And it's an 18,000 cubic foot, 1,800 maybe. It's a powerful fan. So I can sear a steak in a skillet, which makes tons of smoke, and it all gets sucked out of the kitchen, but because the motor is outside, you can still hear yourself think in the kitchen. Fans are loud. But that doesn't help you much unless you're renovating. If you're renovating, it's a great idea. Idea courtesy of Barry Rice Design. My partner, Barry Rice, is brilliant with kitchens. Other favorite tools, I have a powerful gas range that I love. I'm not a gadget guy. I'm with Alton Brown on gadgets and gimmicks. I do not want a hot dog cooker. Don't send me one. I have pots and pans for that. I don't like very many, as Alton calls them, unitaskers, a tool that can only do one thing. I do have one unitasker that I like, and it's a tool called a corn zipper. So when you cook an ear of corn, this tool has a curved surface, fits right on the corn, and strips off 2 perfect rows of kernels. I can think of no use whatsoever other than that for the corn zipper. But anyway, I'm supposed to be making a cocktail, and then so I should continue. So here we have the juice of a grapefruit. I love grapefruit juice. We have the juice, what purports to be the juice of 2 limes, perhaps rather small ones. Where's my rum? We're going to have a couple ounces of light rum. Cheap joke, but it works every time. A 1/4 ounce of maraschino liqueur. Let's see what this stuff tastes like. See, it's got a little syrupy quality. It is liqueur. Pretty high in alcohol. So very sweet, but not nearly as sweet as the maraschino, fake maraschino cherries that are really just, there's no liqueur in those at all. It's just sugar syrup. 1/4 ounce or so of that. And, it's not really that important for me to be shaking and straining this now, come to think of it, because the idea is I'm going to put this in this pretty blue jar and take it to my friend's house, and he's going to shake it. Some people prefer to stir with ice, but shaking is a little more fun. This is a really brilliant cocktail shaker. I was just going to advise that you should shake until your hand hurts, but this shaker is insulated. I've never seen one of those. That's brilliant. There you go. Okay. And here we have the Hemingway cocktail. If you're artsy, you can tie a ribbon around the lid. Where's my lid? I have no lid. Well, you know what? Then maybe I should just drink it. I have to make sure this is okay. Delicious. So, it's a lot of trouble and a little messy to mix cocktails. You have to plan ahead. You got to buy the citrus. So if a guest comes over with this, and all you have to do, and maybe bring some garnish, and all you have to do is pour it into a cocktail shaker with ice and shake. It's instant, fresh, yummy cocktail. I just find that to be a really great, maybe I'm too excited about this drink. I find that to be, as a host that day, I found that to be a really welcome addition to the party. And again, he had stuck a sort of a label that looked kind of like a chalkboard and then had written in grease pencil what the drink was. It's a good thing, as she might say. What's that?
You use chalkboard paint.
Chalkboard paint? Well, yeah, what if you took a little chalkboard paint and just did a little smear on the side of the glass, let it dry? You're all Etsy up in here, aren't you? Well, that's all the stuff I have to present, but if our folks at Jarden would like, I'm happy to take a couple more questions.
Yeah,
or I'll just leave if you prefer.
No, hang out.
What would you like? Jessica, did I get the technical end of things right?
You did. I'm glad we
Great.
had to talk. Right?
Yeah, don't. So, I mean, the upshot for me, water bath canning at home is really easy to do. Come out here to the farmer's market right now when tomatoes are in season and the prices are lower, and just buy a bushel of the stuff and make an afternoon of it. Do it with your kids. It's a lot of fun, and you really are going to thank me come February, and you're going to thank Ball Mason Jars come February when you've got that great, fresh, real food.
Exactly.
It's all about real food for us.
Absolutely. Well, do we have any more questions before we let Ted take a break?
Oh, we have some questions.
Okay, yes.
Hi.
Hi. We're big fans of your show. My kids love your show.
Thank you.
So they asked, one thing was, what's your favorite thing about the show? And they're shy. And what's your favorite food?
Okay, these really cute kids are asking, what's my favorite thing about Chopped, about the show that I'm lucky enough to host? I would say my friendship with our judges. We have 9 judges, as I mentioned before. We have shooting Chopped takes 12 hours for an episode. So my least favorite thing about Chopped is that I have to get up at 5:30 in the morning. But I'm lucky that we shoot Chopped right here in Chelsea Market in New York, and I live in Brooklyn, so I get to go home and sleep in my own bed. My friendship with the judges is my favorite thing. We, during a 12-hour day with a group of chefs, the humor is constant and a little bawdy, a little rowdy. Chefs are fun, rowdy, bawdy people, and they're fun to be around. My whole job is to speculate with the judges all day long about what would you cook? I don't know, what would I cook? I'll throw out an idea. Jeffrey will tell me it's stupid. I'll tell him he's wrong. And we're watching, trying to see what the chefs are doing. You know, it's very difficult to cook anything good in 20 minutes with weird ingredients. And aside from my friendship with those chefs, I think one of my other favorite things about being on Chopped is that if I have a pasta question or a puff pastry question or any other kind of question, I have some of the best culinary minds in the country on speed dial.
There you go.
I can call Alex Guarnaschelli. I can text Scott Conant and say, hey man, how do I cook this bitter melon stuff, you know? I have a couple of Italian-oriented chefs. I have an Indian chef. I have Mark Murphy, who's really sort of a classic French bistro person, but he knows everything. He knows Italian too, lived in Italy for years. I mean, that is such an enormous privilege for me to work with those guys and gals. Keep your eye on the Empire Diner in Chelsea. Amanda Freitag is back.
Yay!
Back in black. Amanda is reinterpreting the classic Empire Diner over on 8th Avenue and 22nd Street. Beautiful stainless steel deco diner right over by London Terrace. She's going to be serving 22 hours a day, and she's going to have delivery, which is to say she's going to make a lot of money.
Yes, she is.
She
That's
is.
awesome.
And more importantly, Amanda, who is a brilliant chef. I don't know if any of you ever got to eat her food at the Harrison back when she cooked there. She's not there anymore. So go to Empire Diner. I think they're going to open in October. And then Amanda is a Jersey girl and proud of it. And she loves diner classics and she loves late night, you know, boozy eating. She also can take those diner classics and take them up a couple of notches from a creativity point of view. So I think you're going to see a lot of familiar things, but you're going to see like a really good burger, probably on a brioche bun, Amanda, if you're watching this, I think a brioche bun would be great. And fancy sauces and beautiful, perfect French fries. Amanda will not serve you a bad French fry. I know it. I'm off on a tangent again. So anyway, my favorite food, I mean, I have a lot of them. What's your favorite food? Pizza? Pasta? Pasta. I love pasta. I have a weakness for potato chips, but I shouldn't tell you that because you're a kid and you should eat healthy. I love broccoli.
Brussels sprouts?
Actually, I do love Brussels
Oh, okay.
sprouts.
Well, that's a good one then.
It's a really good one. I wonder if they would can. I don't know. I think like a lot of things, I'm glad we're talking about vegetables. You know, like Brussels sprouts, I think probably the main reason anybody hates them is because their mom cooked them badly.
Right.
You know, no offense to mom.
Lots of cheese, then I'll eat them.
If you take Brussels sprouts and quarter them and toss them in olive oil and salt and roast them at 450 until they burn a little bit, they're super good. Super good. They'd be done in about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I'm sorry? Is that how you cook them for these guys? You've got beautiful kids. You know it, don't you? I don't know if you can get a shot of these kids, but they're awful cute.
They're adorable.
What do we do now, Jessica?
Well,
It's time for a dance party.
It's a dance party
I'm not
time.
gonna. I really should not dance.
Aw. Well, this is all about fun. So you can dance or you can partake in your beverage.
You can dance if you want to.
Exactly.
the song
So
goes.
we have one more question.
A comment.
Oh, comment. Yes. Where do I?
I'm sorry, this is a one-way conduit of information, madam.
You cannot
okay.
speak.
Please.
You mentioned that the increase in sales of ball jars. For the last 5 years, I've been teaching canning and freezing and pickling at a CSA, which is we have a small farm, and at other things, and our local library has been hosting, and I've been teaching. A lot of young people come. A lot of people are doing backyard gardens, but I've been going to the stores in the area, the supermarkets, Big Lot, all of the other ones, encouraging them to sell these products. And now it's wonderful. They've got a whole section of canning products, even the supermarkets in our area. I live in Poughkeepsie, and they're all carrying the canning products. 5 years ago, you couldn't find a canning jar in a store, and now it's just wonderful.
Go ahead.
That's great news. I think that's really convenient for people. I've never had any trouble finding ball jars in places like Walmart, Target. Actually, my hardware store sells them, and culinary stores sell them. But to have them right in the supermarket, that's a terrific idea. I'm also really glad you mentioned CSA, Community-Supported Agriculture, which is a model in which, and we have lots of them in New York, where you pay a fee ahead of time, and then once a week you get a box of produce from a farm like yours. I did a CSA once with a farm out in Riverhead, Long Island, and they had an open house at the farm. So we got to drive out there, and I want to say their names were Seth and Lisa, it could be Lisa. I knew my farmer all of a sudden. And the power of that is so awesome because you've been to the land, you've seen the farm. It's a real farm, it's not a fancy farm. And they've pledged to you to grow things organically. And so you have this relationship with your food that's so personal.
Right.
So for CSA people are perfect candidates for canning.
Definitely.
I remember my CSA was really heavy on kohlrabi, which is a vegetable that I really hadn't used much before. I don't know how well that would can actually, but and plums, tons of plums. You can make beautiful jam. The problem with the CSA, of course, is that you get this big box full of vegetables that you have to wash right now and package right now. And canning would be a great thing to do with that kind of bounty.
Definitely.
So
and
thank you
something
for
else that you mentioned too is that you were telling the stores to stock the item. We actually have a lot of consumers who call in and contact us, whether it's our Facebook page or our freshreserving.com, wanting to know where they can find our products. And one of the responses is, if it's something that you're really looking for, you need to have a conversation with your store manager and let them know, because if there's a demand, they're going to make sure that they, fill that. And hardware stores, believe it or not, when I did my jam demo earlier, I had all these shocked faces. They were like, why would I go to a hardware store to buy canning supplies? But believe it or not, it's a great place to go. And those store owners are usually really, very happy to assist you and get those products into their store.
Yeah, I don't know how that tradition started, but it might have been, in Grandpa's workshop. What did he store his nails and screws in?
Ball jars.
Mason ball jars that were with the lids screwed to the underside of a shelf.
Absolutely.
So maybe, they're handy.
Right, definitely.
They're darn handy.
They are. I'm a big fan.
As you can see.
I like them a little bit. So anything else before we wrap it up and move on? Last chance. I think that's it. Well, Ted, thank you so much for
My
coming.
pleasure,
I had a
Jessica.
great time. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate the questions and the warmth. Can it forward.
There you go.
Let's do it. Have a good one.
Awesome.
I'm going to
And
take this
also
with me.
Go for it.